Hello, and welcome to today's training, Apps for Therapy, Therapists, and Self-Help, a refresher with Simon Rigo, PsyD. I am Mary Geis. I'm Director of Programs here at ADAA. Before we get started, I would like to go over a few items so you know how to participate in today's event. We've taken a screenshot of an example of the attendee interface. You should see something that looks like this on your own computer desktop in the upper right corner. You have joined the presentation listening using your computer speakers by default. If you would prefer to join over the telephone, just select telephone in the audio pane and the dial-in information will be displayed. You will have the opportunity to submit text questions to today's presenter by typing your questions into the chat pane of the control panel. You may send in your questions at any time. We will collect these and address them during the Q&A session at the end of today's presentation. Now it's my pleasure to introduce you to Simon Rigo, PsyD. Dr. Rigo is a licensed clinical psychologist with close to 20 years of experience in using CBT and other evidence-based psychological treatments. He is Chief Psychologist, Director of Psychology Training, and Director of the CBT Training Program at Montefiore Medical Center. He's also Associate Professor of Clinical Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences at Albert Einstein College of Medicine. Here at ADAA, he's a bit of a star. He has served on the board of directors, is a founding clinical fellow, frequent presenter, fundraiser, and mentor to those coming up in the field. So now I will just take one quick second to pass the screen over to our expert. Thank you so much, Simon, for being with us here today.
Thank you for having me, Mary, and it's a pleasure to come back and revisit this topic that we had as a webinar. I was looking back through my notes. This looks like it's a refresher from a webinar we did back in December of 2013. So my plan is to try to sort of revisit some of the issues that we first visited back then, and I know that that original webinar is available on the ADA website under the webinar section. I think it was within the first year of webinars we were doing in 2013. And we'll look at some of the issues and what's changed. Some things have changed. Obviously, the field of mobile mental health and health in general has continued to evolve. But some of the issues remain. So that's the goal today is look at where we are, what's changed and what hasn't changed, and at the very end, maybe give you all a little bit of a hint of where we're going. In terms of disclosures, I usually like to be clear my role in each talk and webinar that I give, and there's no conflicts of interest in terms of industry support in the material that I'll be covering in this talk. The one added thing I like to say is when it comes to technology, I'm a real technophile and love the concept of technology and the use of technology, and really love my iPhone and iPad and Mac products. And so there'll be a part of this talk which unfortunately is highlighting some of the challenges and problems and limitations that we need to continue to address and discuss and elaborate on as the field continues to grow and be integrated into the work we do. And I don't want that to be mistaken for me to be down on the movement. I'm actually strongly in favor of using digitized advances in the services that we give. It's just we have to be thoughtful about some of the risks relative to the benefits as we move forward. Here's my agenda for us for today. It seems fairly ambitious, but I'll try to do it all in about 45 minutes and leave about 15 minutes for any questions that you may have. I want to start with an overview of the mHealth, just so that we're all on the same page about the definition of what mHealth is, and then move into the adoption and use of apps, software applications as they're known, and just a few statistics on just the prevalence and growth that we've seen in this area, which is pretty astounding. And then I want to spend a chunk of my talk really highlighting some of the issues that we need to consider when it comes to the adoption and use of this mobile health technology in therapy, from both at the therapist stance and from patient stance that may want to use apps as self-help versions of treatment or as treatment augmentation tools So we have to be aware of efficacy and effectiveness, safety and regulation issues, safety and liability issues, privacy and data security issues, and then ethical licensure and jurisdiction issues. These are some of the more commonly discussed and written about issues in the field when we think about telepsychology and telehealth and app use in mental health. And then what I thought I would do was just update us on a few apps for mental health that you might consider if you're new to the field or considering in this myriad of options that we have what might be available for us. I'll give you a few screenshots of some examples. Again, I'm not tied to any of the apps that I will show today, so these are just merely examples. I tried to highlight a bulk of them that are free for download, but there are some that come with a fee that you or a patient would potentially have to pay for it. And so that's up to you to sort of look at reviews and discern the usefulness and applicability of any app that you would use or recommend to a patient. And then, as I said, I'd like to maybe end with a glimpse of the future and a couple of interesting ways that apps are being used to facilitate research clinical trials and also augment treatment in different ways that may be new to you. So along the way as well, for those of you that are receiving CE credit, there will be slides randomly embedded in this talk with a letter that you will need to note. The letter for this first slide is D. And as we go through the slides, as I come to these other slides for CE credit, I will note them and note the letter that you need to note in order to receive credit for the webinar. You have to be able to list all 4 letters in the webinar evaluation to receive CE credit. So this one is D. So as far as an overview of mHealth, there are many, many, many different definitions and examples of mHealth being used today. So I think I particularly like the NIH consensus group statement, which defines mental health or mHealth as the use of mobile and wireless devices to improve health outcomes, healthcare services, and health research. So that's a definition that I like to work off. And to expand upon it just a little bit, the mHealth can include cell phones, tablets, laptops, etc. The actual tools that we use to conduct the treatment or to utilize the mHealth services that are provided. But they can also include external hardware peripherals, such as devices that one may use, say, to monitor heart rate or blood pressure, things of that nature. And then this talk is really going to focus on what's known as the category of software components or apps or applications. I should point out, though, that it's not always so clear, the lines of demarcation around these, because there are some things one may do, such as use a particular application that involves a peripheral device. Say if you're using a device that monitors your exercise activity. So some of them are becoming quite sophisticated, and they may interact with a device like a Fitbit or some other blood pressure monitor as part of an exercise tracker. So the lines get a little bit blurred between what's strictly an app and what becomes a peripheral device, and somewhere in between. The adoption and use has been pretty astounding. When you look at the speed in which mobile devices have been embraced, it really does exceed that of any other previous technology. On the right, if you see the smartphone sales in the United States from 2005 to 2016, you can see the growth there, which as of last year in billions of dollars reached $55 billion. So in roughly 10 or 11 years, going from $3.8 billion to $55 billion is pretty astounding for our country. And just a couple of other factors that are important to consider, and that's by the end of 2017, it's estimated that about a third of the world's population will have a smartphone. And just 6 years ago, that was less than 10%. So that is some phenomenal speed and growth in which we've embraced mobile technology and the applications that go with it. And the stat I often like to add, just to make it relevant, is it's estimated that more people now own a cell phone than a toothbrush, and this stat is, or quote, is widely known in the sort of technology community, and the stats that are used for it is if we have about 7 billion people in the world, it's estimated that about 3.7 billion people own mobile devices, but only about 3.5 billion people own toothbrushes. So that's where we get that from. That shows you the sort of penetration of the market and the potential, real potential benefits that can come from giving people access to a technology that even just a few years ago wasn't readily available. Why apps as a solution? With the rise of mobile technology, I think that you see a similar growth in fact, arguably even more exponential growth in the software applications that are used with mobile technology. And you can see this from, if you think about the Apple Store, which debuted in 2008, July. So it's getting on now 9 years. And when it opened back in July of 2008, there were 500 apps in the Apple Store. And I looked at the stats as of March 2017, just last month, it was floating around 2.2 million apps that are available to Apple iPhone users. And then if you look at the Android market, it actually as of last month, surpassed the iPhone and Apple App Store market, and it now currently has about 2.8 million apps that are available to Android users. And within this really massive market of different applications that one can download, an increasing number are being created for mHealth purposes. And that can be, again, medical and device usage, and that can also be for behavioral and what we might call health and lifestyle purposes. So you see this booming field of software application development for mobile users, which is also booming, and then within that, this core growth of mHealth applications. So when you look at mHealth apps specifically, as of September 15, there were about 165,000 mHealth apps in the Apple, if you combine the Android and Apple stores. And if you just looked at the Apple iTunes stores back in September 15, there were about 90,000 apps. And I mention that specifically because that number for Apple, the Apple Store, was about double the number that had been available just 2 years earlier. So if you looked back roughly August, September of 2013, it was about 45,000 mHealth apps available in the Apple Store. 2 years later, it's at 90,000. And then in the broader combined Android and Apple stores, if you took the number that changed from September of 15 to a year later, which is the latest stat I could find, October of 16, you added almost 100,000 more apps in just the last year. So I'm eager to see what 2017 has done in the year since October of 16, but in roughly, call it 13 months, it went from about 165,000 mHealth specific apps in the two main stores to almost 260,000. So there's been a boom and a tremendous growth in mHealth application development as well. And the estimate is by 2018, almost half of the 3.4 billion smartphone and tablet users will have at least downloaded mHealth applications. Their use remains another question and challenge, but half of the phones out there will have at least one mHealth application sitting on it. So what are the advantages then? This poses, again, some tremendous opportunity to us and tremendous advantages to us in the field. And these are I'm just trying to highlight a few of them for you now. First of all, obviously, there's always an access to care issue that we face when our technology of old relies on a person sitting in front of us in our office. There are people who just can't get to mental health experts because of challenges in where they live or challenges in their lifestyle, such as daycare or scheduling. So one of the primary advantages of software applications is it extends the reach of mental health care beyond the clinic. we can use this technology to get to people who might not otherwise access care. And it can also reduce delays such as wait lists and wait time. If this technology is out there and helpful, maybe in stepped care models or in sequencing models, people might use the software application to ease the burden of some cases by triaging those that are say, milder in severity to the use of applications to start and then augment with in-person direct treatment as necessary, or some hybrid of the two. That's an area of research to be further elaborated upon. It also, in certain parts of the country, I'm in the Bronx, Montefiore Medical Center is here in the North Bronx, and even though we're 104 years in the community here, there is still a certain stigma in the community around seeking mental health treatment. Having an app reduces that barrier. People can access helpful tools and build skills from the privacy of their own home. So those that may be concerned and ultimately not seek help out of fear of being identified or stigmatized in their community may use software applications as an alternative to that. They also promote self-efficacy and self-mastery. If you can encourage a patient to use an app to build a skill between sessions, and that app is pleasant and challenging and enjoyable enough to get investment, then the skills could potentially be learned with more efficiency. And also by doing it on their own with relatively less therapist help, maybe that increases one's sense of self-mastery in being able to manage their symptoms on their own, which might be helpful in terms of abbreviating treatments and creating a relapse prevention frame for patients to rely on the skills they've developed largely on their own. Could certainly also, in the same sense, increase efficiency of treatment. If people are learning skills or more compliant with skills because they're friendlier or more interesting or appealing through software applications, then maybe it can help us to further abbreviate treatment and make the facilitate the learning of skills in a more rapid pace. And if nothing else, it also gives it another opportunity to enhance interaction and engagement with the therapist, because patients may record the skills they're learning or the thought records they're performing, say, on an app, and then bring it in and then have real-time collected data to discuss and talk about with their therapist or potentially a coach. And fortunately, although still a long way to go, the empirical base is growing, and there are people studying the implementation and dissemination of these software applications in fairly rigorous ways now, so that we can actually say something specific about the translation of previously established evidence-based procedures like CBT now being delivered in a novel way through a software app. So the empirical base is also growing, which is very encouraging. Some of you who went to the ADAA conference, which just wrapped up at the beginning of this month in San Francisco, will have noticed in the registration bag you received this card from a company called TheraChat. And so it's actually a nice segue following up on the previous slide, which I just highlighted here. When you think about promoting self-efficacy and improving efficiency of treatment, I did a quick look at this company after noticing this flyer in the bag that we all received at the ADAA convention, and you can see TheraChat's. This is their home page, and this is what they're building as an app that helps to have happier and more engaged clients. It's an automated virtual journaling assistant that keeps your clients working towards their therapy goals in between sessions. And as you can see, what they're really promoting is the follow-up on homework. You can track their progress. It can be personalized per client, and it's free for client use. And you notice on the bottom in the sort of teal green, it's fully HIPAA compliant. So a lot of us have concerns that I will address in the slide coming up about privacy and security. And this app has been clear to promote and build itself on a platform that maintains privacy in a way that is compliant with HIPAA standards today. So what I thought I would do, and I'm going to cross my fingers and hope that I can make this work, is actually show you a 2-minute clip on this from this company that makes TheraChat on the potential use of the app, just to give you an example of how you may think about using this app in your work. Let's see if this works.
Life can be overwhelming. Seeking help dealing with the resulting anxiety simply makes sense. TheraChat is a secure guided journaling tool built for therapists and their clients. It prompts self-reflection in between sessions and helps reach therapy goals. Here's how it works. This is Morgan, a licensed psychologist. She wants to use TheraChat with her client, Alex. To get started, she creates a free TheraChat account and adds him. He gets an email invitation to download TheraChat's free mobile app. After he registers, he starts receiving prompts that encourage him to share and reflect on his experiences. TheraChat does not support direct communication between clients and therapists. Instead, all prompts are generated by a smart algorithm, which means clients have unlimited 24/7 access to TheraChat. Morgan can add her own prompts to the mix. She can view Alex's responses to all prompts on her dashboard and see his most frequently used words as well as their context. These insights will help Morgan make the most of her time with Alex during therapy sessions and improve therapy results. And since TheraChat keeps Alex working towards his therapy goals throughout the week, he'll come to sessions ready to take in Morgan's guidance. Help your clients live better with TheraChat and register today.
So you can see that it can be tempting to say how fantastic. This is where we are. That app is, again, I have no ties to the company, but it seems like it could serve a great function. It's free. It's a nice platform. It's very well laid out. It could facilitate gathering of additional information, engage patients in ways that traditional having people write or journal may not. Everyone, again, will have 50% of people are going to have an app, an mHealth app of some sort on their mobile technology rapidly, so why not that one? And why not think of creatively of ways you may use that for people? And that's just a proxy for any of these apps. And so the excitement part is there's endless possibilities and uses of apps in order to enhance the work that we're doing in treating patients with anxiety and depression and other psychological disorders. But now, unfortunately, I have to put the brakes on things and say, hold on a second, before we get carried away with our enthusiasm, let's just give pause for some of the challenges that are in our face here. So I'm going to now switch gears a little bit and be a little bit of a Debbie Downer. And although it may not be the 99 problems that Jay-Z is known to reference in one of his songs, we do have to think about some of the serious issues and challenges that need to be considered and addressed as we move forward in considering the implementation and adoption of software applications in the work that we do. So here's one: efficacy and effectiveness, right? And I like this quote by Mark Anderson, who's CEO of the AC Group, which is a healthcare IT consulting firm. He acknowledges that there are hundreds of apps that really work and are completely legitimate, but we have to be aware that there are also a lot of apps manufactured by snake oil salesmen, as he calls them, who promote them with a lot of misleading information. And I'm going to come back to this concept in a slide in just a couple of moments about a couple of companies that were actually caught doing this and the consequences of doing so. But so there's our one of our counterbalancing points. We know that they hold great promise, but in most cases there's just not yet enough data to know which ones really work. And I'm echoing a quote by Jason Goldwater, who's VP of Programs and Research for the eHealth Initiative. We cannot say it's an app for CBT just because we know CBT has a strong evidence base, and even the components of CBT that have a strong evidence base, we cannot then extrapolate to say this app that says it uses those components necessarily therefore has evidence behind it. It has to be studied. It's tempting to make the leap because it can even be built on, say, for depression, cognitive therapy and behavioral activation. But because that app itself hasn't been studied, it's hard to know in an empirical sense what it really does, much like the self-help book industry that are based on similar principles. So we really need to consider being cautious about examining if there's been randomized controlled trials on the particular use of an software app when it comes to either treating or augmenting the treatment of a particular psychological disorder. And for that, at the current state, although it's improving, there are relatively few. Next issue to consider is safety and regulation. Who is regulating the mHealth movement? There are guidelines put out by the Food and Drug Administration staff, the last of which was sort of considered quote-unquote final guidance in February of 2015. And you can download this. If you Google mobile mental health applications, guidance for industry and food and drug administration staff, you will come to a PDF which highlights the issues and the considerations and the stance the FDA is taking towards monitoring the safety or regulating the safety of mHealth apps. And in that document, which is a lengthy document and quite technical, one thing that's apparent is what you'll find is a distinction between health apps and wellness apps. And for health apps are, according to the FDA, apps that act as medical devices or accessories to medical devices. And these will require FDA approval and the clinical trials that come with seeking FDA approval. And as of the end of 2013, which is the last data point I could find with any certainty about where we were, there were about 103 of these that had met FDA approval. I know they have been approving more each year. I just couldn't find a document that had with certainty the exact number that in total of mHealth apps that had been FDA approved. I can tell you that that number will not be much bigger than that, despite the exponential growth of the apps in general, and then mHealth as a subcategory within that. That same year in 2013, the FDA made an estimate that it would be reviewing approximately 20 apps a year using what was a similar approach to how it analyzes non-medical substances like food additives and herbal remedies. So you can imagine at about 20 apps a year, if you did the math from 13 till 17, that number would still be under 200. So although the field is booming, the FDA approval review and approval process for regulation is crawling. And I looked and I was able to find a stat for 2016, and it looks like in 2016 they did about 36 that were reviewed. So higher than the 20 they estimated back in 2013, but given the budget and staffing limitations of the FDA, it's a slow pace and it's only going to cover health apps as opposed to wellness apps. And wellness apps are apps that provide users with the ability to log life events, retrieve medical content, and or communicate with clinicians or health centers. These are most of the apps that we will probably end up suggesting or utilizing in the work that we do as psychologists, psychiatrists, social workers, counselors. And the FDA is pretty clear that these are not applications, these wellness applications as they're broadly defined, that they're going to be interested in regulating. They don't see them as posing the same risk as the health apps, which are acting as medical devices or accessories to them, and therefore believe that the physical threat to them is lower, and that communities, by and large, do a good job policing themselves, and therefore have no intention to get involved in the regulation of these apps, which I think most of our work will fall in. There's actually also a third category of app which kind of falls in between those, as I hinted at in the gray, and the FDA is not getting involved in those as far as I can tell either. It's strictly for the apps acting as medical devices or accessories to them. Now, what's really interesting is if you notice the date on this, this is April 3rd of this month. While preparing for a talk I was doing at the ADAA convention, I noticed that in this issue of Wired, The headline was "Wellness Apps," which we just discussed, evade the FDA, which we just hinted at, but only to land in court. And I put the link in green under the heading there, so if you're interested in looking for this article, you can find it. Sorry, it cascaded onto the red a little bit. But what this article goes on to explain is really important, that even though the FDA may not get involved, they note in the article that this again, the beginning of April, last week, which was the last week of March, the New York Attorney General's office settled with 3 mobile health apps it alleged were misleading consumers and engaging in questionable privacy practices. So whereas the FDA didn't get involved, it then became a state issue, and the New York Attorney General's office certainly stepped in. And you can find the terms of the settlement if you Google that online. In brief, the developers, which there was 3 different developers, they ended up paying, which wasn't a huge sum, it was a combined $30,000 in penalties, and agreed to change their advertising language and update their privacy policies to be more transparent, opt-in data collection agreements. So they made some changes based on this, and they paid a nominal fee. But what it did do is it set a precedent for now how this New York State, where I am, and other states might fill in for any oversight gaps at the federal level, which the FDA is unwilling to get involved with. So this is getting interesting now when it comes to app use and prescribing it potentially. App companies and developers have to be aware that although the FDA may not regulate it, there certainly is room for states' attorney general's offices to get involved. And if you look and dig a little bit further, as I did for this talk, it appears that over the last 5 years, the FTC has also investigated and fined and barred a handful of mobile app companies from making unsubstantiated medical claims that their products could do things, anything from like reading blood pressure to picking out cancerous moles to turning back the clock on one's eyesight. So the FTC may also get involved, and the Federal Trade Commission protects consumers from fraud. So there's at least 2 viable alternatives to help protect consumers when it comes to patient safety and software applications. For those of you, again, looking for CE credit, the letter at the moment is the letter T. And again, you need all 4 letters in order to be able to receive CE for this webinar. Next issue to consider is the safety but liability issue now. So safety and liability comes often into the area of what we think of and fear in our field as malpractice. And Runkle published a great article in a journal called the SciTech Lawyer a couple of years ago, in which she said malpractice lawyers are going to potentially take advantage of these emerging mHealth app technologies as a new opportunity for litigation. And that article, if you download it and read it, goes on to highlight how malpractice claims in a legal sense really require a proof that a doctor owed a duty of care to a patient and deviated from it, with the patient then being injured as a result. And the primary area where this comes to mind in a lot of the work that we do when it comes to work with psychological disorders, maybe in the assessment of suicidality and or crisis management, and then having access to the therapist being a particular concern. So with the implementation and adoption of apps, the question becomes, what happens to the traditional doctor-patient relationship? This is a prerequisite for malpractice liability. It's typically historically been based on direct contact in care. And the question now is with the evolution of apps and accessibility from distance and 24/7, how is it going to change that? And at the moment, at least if you read another article by Kluge, which appeared in the International Journal of Medical Information, there's no agreement yet as to what a doctor's liability would be if he or she injured a patient as a result of faulty or inaccurate information supplied by the patient. So we have, this is a field that's evolving with guidelines that are trying to catch up with the technology, and it's something to consider. There are safety and liability issues when it comes to what we're advocating for our patients that we can't ignore and want to, at a minimum, consider for an informed consent and agreement about access and use, but on a much more conservative side, it may be still waiting to see how the legal implications shake out in the months to come. The next issue is privacy and data security. Legal protections cannot keep pace with the changing technological landscape. And the typical thing we think of when we think about privacy and data security, as I mentioned when I showed you that video of the TheraChat app, which is HIPAA compliant, is, well, what's HIPAA going to do about this? And at least according to Yang and Silverman, who wrote an interesting article in a journal called Health Affairs back in 2014, was that the HIPAA's privacy protections may not apply in every situation involving health apps. And this seems to be, by my read of the article, boiling down to the nature of what's a covered entity. Covered entities typically involve healthcare plans or providers that transmit healthcare information electronically. But it seems to be that the protections apply to most users of healthcare apps within the hospitals. And therefore, at least argued in the article, and some thinking, is that consumers who use the apps outside of a healthcare setting might currently not be considered to be covered entities and therefore not subject to HIPAA privacy protections. So this obviously needs to be further elaborated upon and discussed and clarified as well. There is also within this field of privacy and data security the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. That only protects against unauthorized accessing of data from a person's computer. However, a lot of the software that we voluntarily download is not considered, therefore, unauthorized access. We have a choice to use it. And if we are downloading it, we are often considered voluntary users, and then with that implicitly authorizing the access of data from, say, the software developer, for example. This also falls closely within what's called the Electronic Communications and Privacy Act, which protects patients' data from third-party access or acquisition when a healthcare provider or consumer uses a healthcare app, except there's an exception in this act for user consent. And this, once consent is given, and that's usually built into all those terms and conditions that apply when you download and use an app, this allows parties to access third parties to access user information, often with the intent of improving the performance of the app itself. So it probably does not protect against access or the acquisition of data by the developer of a private health app. So we have to be aware and read very carefully all these terms and conditions and have our patients be aware of them as well when signing up or potentially using an app in our practice. And finally, this is probably the most obvious one, but I wanted to highlight it so we don't forget. With the advent of mobile technology, most of these software applications are used on portable devices like our smartphones and tablets, and these can obviously easily be stolen. So there's often cases in the news where a laptop is stolen out of someone's car and collected by, and data there had data on it that had been collected, and therefore there's considerations about how to protect the data on the devices that we use, knowing they could be stolen or lost. So some simple steps maybe to ensure that the programs that we use are encrypted and or at least at a minimum we have password protection on the devices that we're using. Again, in terms of thinking about informed consent, it's useful to have people not only be verbally informed about the limits of confidentiality and the potential risks of using the apps, but even writing it into your informed consent documents that you have for therapy with patients that you give at the beginning of treatment. And then last but not least, with the issues to consider, I want to highlight ethical licensure and jurisdiction issues. This is a hot one that really involves when we use health apps to communicate information that involve cross-jurisdictional practice across state lines or even internationally. And the issue that gets raised here is this cross-jurisdictional licensing issue. So the first thing to note when it comes to this is that there's no federal scheme that exists. And according to Yang and Silverman, there's little interest in Congress in enacting such a scheme. So we can't expect anytime soon that there will be any federal guidance on what to do when it comes to person being licensed in one state and then using healthcare apps or other software to communicate with a patient that's in another state. What that means is this is then falling under the regulation of state governments. And that then means we have to then potentially look at what are 50 different sets of licensing requirements. And I hate to say it, but there are a wide range of different opinions across different states when it comes to jurisdictional practice across state lines and the use of telepsychology. So our challenge, if we're going to do this, is to check each state's telehealth laws. And I suggest these get updated regularly. So you may Google something like telepsychology 50-state review, which I did, or you can look to some online resources such as the APA Practice Organization has a telepsychology 50-state review that it tries to update. There's also ones written by legal firms that try to stay current with where each state is in terms of this law. There's actually a couple of cases that are very interesting that have tested some of these issues. The one that I'd probably highlight now is in 2014, the Pennsylvania Psychological Licensing Board actually filed an action to stop a psychologist that was located in Israel from delivering psychological services to patients who were residing in Pennsylvania. That doctor was licensed in Israel but not in Pennsylvania. And on his website, he was apparently promoting and advertising his telepsychology services, and he was using a Pennsylvania address. But there was, again, an action was filed to stop him from delivering those services. In 2009, I'll give you one more, a Colorado doctor. This is a medical doctor, so it's a little bit different, but it gets at the licensure, jurisdiction, and telehealth aspects of what we're discussing here today. 2009, a Colorado doctor was found guilty of practicing medicine without a license in California after prescribing an antidepressant via an online pharmacy to a 19-year-old student. Now, this student ultimately committed suicide, which made this case particularly intense, but the doctor was actually given a 9-month jail sentence for doing this. And it was a unique case and is often thought now of the poster child for people who have concerns about practicing across state lines. So some have argued that it was extreme because of the patient's suicide and not likely, therefore, to serve as a precedent or case law for everyday or more standard future cases across state lines, but there is a precedent and you want to be aware of it and the implications when it comes to, again, not only licensure and jurisdiction, but patient safety issues. That's how they interacted in that particular case. So in summary, mobile mental health apps have tremendous potential. For all the reasons I said, they can extend the reach of mental health beyond the clinic. They can be used as adjunctive tools. They can improve implementation and impact of traditional interventions. But despite their potential, in most cases, there's just not enough data yet to know which ones actually work. And there's several other issues that I highlighted that need to continue to loom and will continue to loom over the market that need to be addressed. For those of you, again, seeking CE credit, the letter at the moment is U. That is our third letter. And to receive CE credit, you must be able to list all 4 letters in this presentation. So I'm now going to highlight a few app examples, not all of these ones, and then briefly hint at the future of where we could go in app use. Again, I use this slide as a joke because this just highlights the thousands and thousands that we have, almost several hundred thousands of apps that we can choose from nowadays. If you're overwhelmed, here are 4 resources that I think may be a useful starting place. You can Google these, or you can find them, including our own Anxiety and Depression Association of America. We have a list on the website of reviewed mental health apps that's growing. And I know there is a committee that's looking for app reviewers. So if you're interested, you can go onto the website and find out how to get involved in mental health app reviews. And there's a structured format we use to evaluate the apps, and then that gets posted, and that helps give guidance to other people. Psychiatry Advisor, Psychology Today, World of Psychology at Psych Central all have like the top 10 mental health apps for, say, 2016, or the top apps for your mental health. So you could look at those and use those as a starting point for ones you may want to explore further. I'm just going to highlight, there are apps for assessment. For example, there's a depression test if you wanted to use it in your practice, just expanding this into a screenshot. This is basically the PHQ-9. So people can take the test. It goes over the questions, the 9 questions, and it gives a total score along with an interpretation of the score, and then that's graphable. There's psychoeducation apps that one could use to augment the treatment with terms, definitions, explanations of psychological symptoms. There's different apps for symptom monitoring and treatment tracking. Here's the T2 mood tracker, which if we expand allows notes. It allows one to by default track anxiety, depression, general well-being, head injuries, post-traumatic stress, and general stress. But those you can modify, you can delete, you can add your own category of something to track, and then those areas can be graphed over time. There's apps specifically for specific disorders. Here's just a few for anxiety and panic. There's ones for suicide prevention, and if we look at Operation Reach Out, which is a VA app, you can see that it's largely video-based. There's apps within that give videos for things like reaching out to someone, soldiers talking about hope and other options, things not being so bad. And again, although this is VA created, it can often be very useful for anyone that is struggling with suicidal ideation. You can also see here that under resources, there's links to websites and other information that people could use that takes them off this app and onto the internet. And then there's a help center with, by default, the suicide prevention hotline, but then one can add and customize their own contacts that they'd want to call or have quick access to in the event of intense suicidality. And then added is activities, which encourage people activities to engage in to help cope with distress and suicidal ideation. There's apps for substance use and abuse. There's apps for diet and nutrition. The one that I wanted to highlight was the calorie counter and diet tracker. This you can see, what's nice about it is it has a database of over 6 million foods that are then easily pulled into the data for calories that one can use to track. And then it's also got a bar scanner now, so you can, if you don't have it in the database, you can just scan the product you're holding and get the nutritional information. And then it syncs with other apps and devices like the Fitbit and lifestyle and exercise apps, so that you can also not only build in nutritional monitoring, but also exercise monitoring as well. There's exercise trackers, as I just hinted at. The Nike Training Club is one that uses a lot of very sort of polished videos. Serena Williams is there on it. You can work with Serena or other personalized training programs. And there's even technique videos to make sure what you're doing is following the proper form. And then there's customized daily workouts. There's tons and tons on relaxation and meditation. There's ones for sleep disorders and insomnia. Again, one put out by the VA is the CBTI app. It is a CBTI coach, as it's called, and it has everything from a sleep prescription of when you should be going to bed and wake to sort of maximize your sleep efficiency, to a insomnia severity index built in so you can assess the severity of your insomnia, to relaxation tools, cognitive tools, a sleep journal, everything automated and all free. If you just expand it to CBTI in general, there are literally dozens and dozens, some you pay for and some that are free. You could play around with them and see which ones resonate with you and your patients, but these are just some examples if you're in the app stores to look at them. If you wanted to do DBT, the world is expanding on DBT apps, from diary cards and skill coaching to emotion regulation tools and other modules, to stress tolerance and mindfulness that are found in DBT. For acceptance and commitment therapy, they're also now expanding in terms of general ACT-like treatment modules to almost specific applications of ACT towards smoking cessation and weight management. And then I just wanted to highlight, I think the U.S. Department of Veteran Affairs really does a tremendous job. And you can see these are all VA apps that have really expanded in the last 2 years, all free to download. Although intended for veterans, you can adapt them and use them in treatment, everything from PTSD to acceptance and commitment therapy, suicide prevention, smoking cessation, insomnia. They just do a wonderful job at creating user-friendly apps. I'm just going to briefly mention before I wind up and leave 10 minutes for questions. Here's one aspect of the future. This was just to highlight the amazing ability of apps to reach an audience. This is a Brighton study, which was a depression study It was published last year in the British Medical Journal Innovations. It was conducting a fully mobile and randomized clinical trial for depression, access, engagement, and expense. And although the data is still being gathered, it's using 3 different software apps to help with depression, and they're still analyzing the data. One was actually a game which taught attentional control. Another was a more traditional problem-solving one, and I think the third was a behavioral health tips app. But the interesting thing I found about this study is they wanted to not only use the app itself to deliver the treatment, but to actually conduct the trial. And they hoped to find 150 participants, but they actually reached that goal in, believe it or not, just 1 week. They had their recruitment. So they applied for an extension. And at 5 months later, when they decided to close enrollment, they had 2,900 participants in this study. And what's most impressive is it was ethnically similar to the 2013 US Census, and it represented people from 8 of the 15 most rural states in our country. So these are the traditionally underserved populations that we're always trying to create opportunities to reach and access. This study is a great example of a large recruitment base in these traditionally difficult areas to reach with an ethnically representative sample. So that's really impressive. I have time. I'm going to do one more quickie, and then I'm going to stop. This is Slo-mo, which is the first digital platform for paranoia. So for our psychotic patients or more severely mentally ill patients, self-management tools is coming out of the UK, which empowers users to visualize their thoughts and the fast thinking habits associated with paranoia and slow down a moment to manage upsetting thoughts. I'm going to show you a brief video, and then I'll end for today. So here's Slo-mo, a little description.
Thoughts about others wanting to cause us harm are common. Approximately 1 in 5 of us experience often.
Hello, I'm Philippa Garrity, and I'm the clinical lead for services for people with severe mental illness and psychosis in the South London and Maudsley Trust, and Professor of Clinical Psychology at the Institute of Psychiatry, Psychology and Neuroscience. Paranoid thoughts can have a devastating impact on people's lives. It's estimated that schizophrenia, of which paranoia is one of the most common symptoms, costs the UK economy £11.8 billion a year. Since the 1990s, our research team has been developing the understanding of paranoid thoughts and the treatments for them. Based on this work, we have produced Slo-mo, which is the very first digital therapy platform for paranoia, consisting of interactive digital sessions and a mobile app. The platform provides self-management tools for people to take control of their lives. Slo-mo is needed because only a minority of people have access to talking therapies for paranoia. Even when these therapies are available, people can struggle to make use of them due to understandable problems with motivation and memory. The Slo-mo platform requires only a brief therapist training, and it's designed to be more engaging, easy to use and memorable, so that people are more willing and able to apply the tools learnt in their daily lives. The Slo-mo app first empowers users to make sense of their difficulties by visualizing their thoughts, the associated distress, and the fast thinking habits we know are related to paranoia. As therapy progresses, the app prompts people to slow down for a moment and provides tips to encourage slower thinking habits. These tips support the user to notice new information and develop alternative explanations so that they might, in the end, feel much less distressed.
The project team is a unique collaboration of leading healthcare designers from the Helen Hamlin Centre for Design, Royal College of Art, and clinician academics at the Institute of Psychiatry, Psychology and Neuroscience, King's College London. The Slo-mo platform was developed in partnership with service users from the South London and Maudsley NHS Foundation Trust. Their expertise was drawn on to repeatedly test and refine the platform. User feedback for the Slo-mo platform has been very positive. Clinical studies are being conducted, including a Wellcome Trust-funded project for integrating wearable technology. Slo-mo has the potential to be implemented in the NHS and internationally, thereby reducing economic costs and significantly improving the well-being of people affected by paranoid thoughts.
So you can see the future is definitely bright. And for those, again, looking to receive CE credit, the last letter is E. And again, you need all 4 letters to receive credit for the webinar evaluation. And with that, I will say thank you for your time, and I hope you found this discussion useful.
Great, thank you so much, Simon. Right now, we do not have any questions that are in, so while people just take a moment to submit their questions, do you have any final comments?
I will say that I believe in the materials. If people are interested in the videos from Slo-mo and from TheraChat, you've now uploaded them to files for people?
Correct. If the attendees click on the materials section in their attendee interface, they should see that. They should be able to download them. And then also they will go out again in the follow-up email that will come out in about an hour.
And I'll add also, if any of the materials that I referenced, if people are interested in the actual documents and have difficulty finding them, they can feel free to contact me at the email address here listed on the last slide, and I'll be happy to send them the materials so that they can review them for themselves.
Okay. Well, it looks like you did such a comprehensive presentation. There are no lingering questions. So I will just take this moment to thank you, Simon, and to thank our participants for attending today's training. As I mentioned, in about 1 hour, you will receive an email that includes an evaluation of today's presentation. And we would appreciate if you would complete that and provide your feedback. We really do take your comments into consideration to strengthen our professional education programming. And the email will also include a link to view a recording of this webinar. So on behalf of ADAA and our presenter, thank you so much for joining us today. And hold on, one question came in. We do have a minute, so I will not wrap up just yet. Are there any apps for Parkinson's or for sex offenders?
That's a great question. Both of those fields are beyond what I practice, so I actually don't know the answer to that. But given the development of apps that are out there, I wouldn't be surprised if there were. I would encourage you to do what I did, which is since I'm an Apple user, I go into the iTunes store periodically and I just Google terms of disorders or treatment approaches that I'm familiar with or that I use in my own therapy. So I Google things like CBT or insomnia or anxiety or panic, and then I just browse what comes up and I look at user reviews, and then I Google if I find an app that I'm interested in, I usually Google the app itself and look for background on the company. So I would do the same thing with Parkinson's and or sex offenders and see what's out there, because you'd be surprised. Again, this Slo-mo was really interesting to me for paranoia, so I wouldn't be surprised if people if they haven't done it, if it's not something coming soon.
Okay, and do you have any thoughts about mobile apps versus web-based programs for intervention for anxiety and depression? Do web-based programs still have some promise?
Yeah, I think that, a lot of them, as you saw with TheraChat, actually has, you can access it from your PC and a mobile version. So, and I think given the rapid use and adoption of mobile technologies with the phones and tablets, that just seems to be the way things are going to go, because of the ease of and rapid nature which people are adopting and using mobile technology. But there'll definitely be a place for like web programs and web-based treatment packages, and there are actually many of those that are growing. If you go to my website, simonrego.com, and look under resources for professionals, I tried to list a few of the web-based software platforms that people can use to help augment treatment as well.
Wonderful, thank you so much. Another attendee is wondering if a copy of the slides will be available.
I can certainly, Mary, if you're good with it, I'll convert them into handouts and then send them to you as a PDF, and people can have them.
That will be great. I will make sure everybody who was on today gets a copy.
Sure. Okay,
and for real this time, I will wrap up and say thank you. And on behalf of ADAA and Dr. Rego, thank you for joining us today, and have a great rest of your day. And we hope to see you next month.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Simon.
Bye-bye.